Cygnus stumbled out of the NASAT shuttle pod, mandibles clicking in disgust as he laid eyes on the primitive human school, knowing his experience there would determine the fate of the fragile human NASAT piece. Robert King watched the alien emerge, heart pounding, the weight of the world on his 16-year-old shoulders. This was it. The first NASAT exchange student ever. Everything hinged on this going well. But it immediately didn't go well at all. Cygnus recoiled as the chaotic din of the human students assaulted his auditory membranes. Strange smells wafted from the cafeteria, overloading his olfactory glands. Students shoved past each other in the halls with no sense of order. It was pure pandemonium compared to the structured efficiency of NASAT schools. Humans are even more primitive than I imagined, Cygnus sniffed disdainfully to himself, regretting his decision to come here. What a backward species. Robert hurried over, smiling nervously, trying to welcome Cygnus. Hi, I'm Robert, your student guide. Let me show you a route. I can find my own way, Cygnus interrupted rudely, stalking off, leaving Robert stunned. As Robert caught up, showing Cygnus to his classes, the NASAT made disparaging comments about everything. He scoffed at the archaic paper textbooks and outdated computers. He criticized the undisciplined students slouching in their seats. We NASAT mastered quantum computing while you barely discovered electricity, Cygnus said scathingly as they passed the robotics lab. Robert gritted his teeth, trying to stay polite, his patience wearing thin. Things only escalated from there. Cygnus nearly purged his digestive tract at the cafeteria food. In gym class, he refused to participate in the crude physical exertions. He talked down to the teachers, proclaiming how much more advanced NASAT education was. Tensions finally exploded when Cygnus loudly insulted human intelligence, declaring that NASAT toddlers had more brain power. Robert's friends angrily confronted the alien, a physical altercation barely avoided. Wanting to salvage things, Robert pulled Cygnus aside, struggling to keep his cool. Look, I get our school seems primitive to you, but if you actually talk to people, you'll see humans are smarter than you think. We're different from the SATs, but that doesn't make us inferior. Keep an open mind, okay? Something in Robert's words gave Cygnus pause. The human was right. He'd made snap judgments without truly interacting with students. Perhaps there was more to these humans. Fine, Cygnus clicked grudgingly. I will attempt to learn more before deciding. It was a start, but with tension still boiling between humans and NASATs, every misstep threatened to shatter the fragile peace. Cygnus would have to completely change his perspective, and fast, for the two species to have any hope of coexisting. The next morning, Robert met Cygnus at the school entrance, determined to change the NASAT's perception of humans. I want to show you some of the best parts of our school today, Robert said. Cygnus clicked his mandibles skeptically but followed. Their first stop was an advanced physics lecture. As the professor delved into string theory and quantum mechanics, Cygnus leaned forward, his compound eyes widening. The concepts were complex, far beyond what he expected primitive humans to grasp. Robert noticed Cygnus's surprise and smiled. Next, they visited the school's robotics lab. Cygnus watched the human students huddled around sophisticated machines, lines of code flashing across computer screens. Sleek, autonomous robots whirred and clinked. A student waved them over excitedly. Check out our latest project. As Cygnus examined the intricate circuitry and elegant designs, a thought struck him. These robots showed remarkable craftsmanship and ingenuity, comparable even to NASAT technology. He clicked his mandibles thoughtfully, reassessing humanity's potential. Over lunch, Robert regaled Cygnus with stories of human achievement. He described the awe of the first moon landing, the soaring beauty of the Sistine Chapel, the brilliant works of Shakespeare and Einstein. Cygnus listened intently, his disdain gradually replaced by grudging respect. Perhaps there was more to these humans than he initially believed. In history class, the teacher detailed humanity's many conflicts. From ancient battles to world wars, the death toll was staggering. Cygnus recoiled at the thought of such violence. How could a species be so brutal to its own kind? But Robert interjected, pointing out how humans also united in times of crisis, fighting pandemics, aiding refugees, standing together against injustice. "We're not perfect," Robert said, "but we're learning to be better, to work together, just like with the NASAT." As they left school, shouts erupted from across the street. An angry mob waved signs with anti-NASAT slogans, hurling insults at Cygnus. "Go back to where you came from," they yelled. "Earth is for humans." Robert quickly steered Cygnus away, but the words echoed in the NASAT's mind. He had faced prejudice from his own kind for choosing this exchange program. Now, he saw that same fear and hatred reflected in these humans. For the first time, Cygnus felt a flicker of empathy. That evening, as they sat in Robert's living room, Cygnus opened up. "On NASAT, many oppose this exchange," he confessed. "They see humans as inferior, a threat. I shared those views. But being here with you, it's challenged my beliefs." Robert nodded. "I get it. A lot of humans are scared of the NASAT too. They don't understand you. But maybe that can change, starting with us." They talked late into the night, Cygnus sampling various human dishes. He developed a particular fondness for pizza, while they exchanged stories of life on their respective homeworlds. Differences still stood between them, but they found common ground in their love of science, their hopes and dreams. And before he slept that night, Cygnus marveled at how much his perspective had changed in mere days. Humans were still primitive in many ways compared to the NASAT, but they had potential. More than that, they had heart. He purposed to make the most of his time on Earth, to learn and to teach. But outside forces conspired against them. The protest at the school had gone viral, stirring up controversy. Pundits on both sides fanned the flames while parents demanded Cygnus's removal. Afraid of the backlash, the school board called an emergency meeting. Some wanted to cancel the exchange program immediately. Others worried what message that would send. The discussions grew heated as Cygnus's fate and the future of human-NASAT relations hung in the balance. Robert and Cygnus arrived at school the next morning to find a chaotic scene. News vans lined the street, their satellite dishes stretching skyward. Protesters waved signs and chanted slogans, their voices carrying across the school grounds. "Go home, bug!" someone yelled as Cygnus stepped out of Robert's car. Robert placed a protective hand on Cygnus's shoulder. "Ignore them. Let's get inside." They pushed through the crowd, dodging microphones thrust in their faces. Inside, the hallways buzzed with nervous energy. Students whispered and pointed as Cygnus passed. The intercom crackled to life. "All students report to the gymnasium for an emergency assembly." Hundreds of teenagers filed into the gym, filling the bleachers. Principal Simmons stood at the podium, his face grave. "As you're all aware, our school is participating in a groundbreaking exchange program with the NASAT," he began. "This is a crucial opportunity to foster understanding between our species. I urge you all to welcome Cygnus and treat him with respect." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Many students nodded, but others scowled. Suddenly a voice rang out. "NASATs go home!" It was Jack, standing up in the bleachers. A group around him took up the chant. "NASATs go home! NASATs go home!" Principal Simmons tried to regain control, but the chanting grew louder. Cygnus shrunk in his seat, his mandibles clicking nervously. Robert couldn't take it anymore. He stood up, his voice cutting through the noise. "Stop it! All of you!" The gym fell silent, all eyes on Robert. "Look, I get it. The NASAT are different. They're alien. It's scary, but Cygnus isn't here to hurt us. He's here to learn about us, and for us to learn about him. If we don't try to understand each other, we'll never have peace. We have to be better than this." Robert's words hung in the air. Even Jack looked thoughtful. Cygnus stared at Robert, his compound eyes wide with surprise. As the assembly dispersed, Principal Simmons made another announcement. "We've organized a field trip for a select group of students to visit the Stellar Horizons research facility. Robert, Cygnus, Jack, and a few others will attend." The next day, their small group boarded a bus to the facility. Inside, they marveled at the cutting-edge technology. Massive telescopes peered into the depths of space. Prototype spacecraft gleamed under bright lights. Even Cygnus couldn't hide his fascination. "Impressive," he clicked, examining a holographic star map. But the peace was short-lived. Jack cornered Cygnus near a model of an ion drive. "I knew it," he spat. "You're just here to steal our tech, aren't you?" Cygnus recoiled. "That's not true. I'm here to learn, not to spy." "Yeah, right," Jack sneered. "My dad lost his job when your people showed up. You NASATs are ruining everything." The argument escalated, drawing attention from the others. Robert rushed over, trying to separate them. A researcher intervened. "Gentlemen, please. This technology represents the future of space exploration, a future humans and NASAT could share if we work together." The words seemed to penetrate. Jack stepped back, his anger deflating slightly. Cygnus's antennae drooped. "I'm sorry about your father," Cygnus said softly. "I didn't know." A tense truce settled over the group as they boarded the bus home. But fate had other plans. Halfway back to town, the bus sputtered and veered off the road, crashing into a ditch. The driver slumped over the wheel, unconscious. Panic set in as the students realized they were stranded in a remote area with no cell signal. "We need to call for help," Robert said, trying to stay calm. Cygnus examined the bus's dashboard. "I might be able to repair the communication system," he offered. "NASAT technology isn't so different." As Cygnus worked, the other students huddled together. Hours passed. They shared snacks and stories, finding unexpected common ground. "My dad's name is John," Jack said quietly to Cygnus. "He worked in manufacturing before, Cygnus paused his work. "On NASAT, my clutchmates thought I was crazy for coming here. They said humans were dangerous." Jack nodded slowly. "I guess we're all a little afraid of what we don't understand." Finally, Cygnus got the system working. "I've sent our coordinates," he announced. "Help should arrive soon." When the rescue vehicles arrived, they found a very different group than the one that had left that morning. The shared ordeal had brought them closer, erasing some of the barriers between them. Back at school, word of their adventure spread quickly. Students who had been wary of Cygnus now approached him with curiosity instead of fear. The principal held a special assembly, praising the group's cooperation. Inspired by the change, Cygnus approached Robert and Jack with an idea. "What if we created a symbol of unity between humans and NASAT, something to show what we can achieve together?" Robert's face lit up. "That's brilliant. We could design it as a class project." Even Jack nodded. "Yeah, I'm in. Could be cool." As they began sketching ideas, Cygnus reflected on how much had changed. Humans were still strange to him in many ways, but he was starting to see their potential. There would be challenges ahead, but for the first time, he felt truly hopeful about the future of human-NASAT relations. Unknown to the students, news of their cooperation had reached higher levels. In government offices on Earth and NASAT, officials debated the implications. Some saw it as a promising sign of progress. Others worried it might upset the delicate balance between their species. As Cygnus, Robert, and their classmates threw themselves into their Unity project, they were unaware of the political storm brewing around them. Their evolving friendships would soon be tested by forces beyond their control. The classroom buzzed with energy as Robert, Cygnus, and Jack huddled around a table covered in sketches. Their classmates crowded nearby, offering suggestions for the Unity symbol. "We need something bold and powerful," Jack insisted, pushing forward a drawing of crossed swords, "to show humans aren't pushovers." Cygnus clicked his mandibles in disagreement. "That sends the wrong message. Look at this." He displayed a holographic projection of intricate circuitry. "Clean lines, advanced tech. That's what NASAT brings to the table." Robert sighed, rubbing his temples. "Guys, we're supposed to be bringing people together, not showing off." The debate escalated. Soon, the room split into factions. Human students gravitated toward Jack's militaristic designs, while a smaller group backed Cygnus's futuristic concepts. Voices rose, tempers flared. "You're missing the point entirely," Robert shouted. startling the room into silence. He took a deep breath. This isn't working. We need a new perspective. Everyone, grab your stuff. We're taking a field trip. An hour later, the group shuffled into the Metropolitan Museum of Art. As they wandered the halls, Robert pointed out various symbols and artworks. See how this cave painting tells a story without words, and he said, gesturing to a prehistoric mural. And over here, look at how this abstract piece makes you feel something, even if you can't explain why. The students' expressions softened as they took in the diverse array of human creativity. Even Jack seemed thoughtful, studying a World War II propaganda poster with newfound appreciation. Cygnus paused in front of a Jackson Pollock, his compound eyes wide. I never understood the appeal of such chaos, he admitted. But now I see it's about shared experience, isn't it? The artist and viewer connecting across time and space. Robert nodded, a smile spreading across his face. Exactly. That's what we need to capture. Back at school, the group attacked the project with renewed vigor. Ideas flowed freely, building on each other. As the final design took shape, a sense of excitement filled the room. The double helix is perfect, Cygnus chittered, manipulating the 3D model. Our species, intertwined but distinct. Jack nodded, adding his own touches. And these figures reaching out, that's us, bridging the gap. Robert stepped back, admiring their work. The stars tie it all together, a shared universe of possibilities. The day of the presentation arrived. As Robert unveiled their symbol to the packed auditorium, a hush fell over the crowd. Then, applause erupted. A human diplomat approached, beaming. This is exactly what we need for our new cultural exchange program. Well done, all of you. Later, as the three friends basked in their success, Cygnus turned to Robert and Jack. I must confess, when I first arrived, I didn't think much of humans, but working with you, I've learned so much. Jack clapped him on the back, careful to avoid the sensitive spots they'd discussed. Same here, bug boy. You're all right. Robert grinned, throwing his arms around both of them. Just think of what we can accomplish together. Unbeknownst to the celebrating students, a shadowy figure observed from the back of the auditorium. He spoke quietly into a communicator. The integration is proceeding faster than anticipated. This could be problematic. The auditorium erupted in thunderous applause as Robert, Cygnus, and Jack unveiled their unity symbol. Flashes from cameras illuminated their beaming faces as they stood on stage, arms linked in a show of solidarity. Principal Simmons approached the trio, his eyes gleaming with pride. Outstanding work, you three. I have some exciting news. You've been chosen to represent our school at the upcoming Human Nasat Youth Leadership Summit. Robert's eyes widened. Seriously, that's incredible. Jack pumped his fist in the air. We're going to rock this summit! Cygnus clicked his mandibles excitedly. An opportunity to further our mission of understanding. I'm honored. Their elation was short-lived. Just days before their departure, breaking news flashed across every screen in the school cafeteria. A somber-faced anchor reported, a terrorist attack has struck a Nasat delegation visiting Earth. The extremist group known as the Xenoclasts has claimed responsibility for a bombing that injured several Nasat diplomats. Cygnus froze, his antennae drooping in shock. Robert placed a comforting hand on his friend's carapace. Are you okay? Cygnus's compound eyes flickered with a mix of emotions. I can't believe this happened. My own people. Jack leaned in, his voice low and serious. Maybe we should reconsider going to the summit. It might not be safe. Cygnus straightened, his mandibles clicking with newfound purpose. No, we must go. Now more than ever, we need to show that violence won't deter us from seeking understanding. He turned to his human friends. But I'll need you both to have my back. Things might get tense. Robert nodded firmly. Always. The day of departure arrived, the school abuzz with nervous energy. Additional security personnel scrutinized everyone entering the building. As the trio boarded their transport, Principal Simmons gave last-minute instructions. Stay alert, stay together, and remember why you're there. he said, his usual jovial demeanor replaced by grim seriousness. The journey to the summit location was tense and quiet. Upon arrival, they were ushered through multiple security checkpoints before entering a vast, domed structure. Hundreds of young delegates from across Earth and Nasat colonies milled about, their excited chatter tinged with an undercurrent of anxiety. As the opening ceremony began, a hush fell over the crowd. The summit organizer, a stern-faced human woman, took the stage. "Recent events have cast a shadow over our gathering," she began, her voice firm. "But we must not let fear divide us. This summit represents our shared commitment to a peaceful future. Let us use this time to build bridges, not walls." The first day's sessions separated human and Nasat delegates. Cygnus found himself in a room full of his fellow Nasat, their chittering voices rising in heated debate. Pressing close to a group near the back, he overheard troubling sentiments. "The humans are too soft," one Nasat youth clicked angrily. Their complacency allowed the xenoclasts to grow unchecked. Another bobbed in agreement. "Perhaps we've been too eager to integrate. We should focus on protecting our own interests." Cygnus's antennae twitched with unease as he listened, realizing the depth of resentment bubbling beneath the surface. Meanwhile, in the human discussion groups, Robert found himself defending the Nasat against a barrage of suspicion. "How do we know they're not just here to steal our tech?" a red-faced boy demanded. "They're already light years ahead of us." "Yeah," a girl chimed in. "And now there are Nasat terrorists? How can we trust any of them?" Robert took a deep breath, choosing his words carefully. "Look, I get it. The situation is complicated, but I've seen firsthand how much we can learn from each other. My friend Cygnus—" "Oh, your pet bug," someone sneered. Jack, sitting nearby, stood up abruptly. "Watch it," he growled. "Cygnus is our friend, and he's done more for human-Nasat relations than any of you." The combined summit reconvened in an atmosphere thick with tension. As youth representatives from both species took turns at the podium, calling for unity and understanding, Robert noticed Cygnus fidgeting nervously. "You okay?" he whispered. Cygnus clicked softly. "I'm worried. There's more anger on both sides than I realized." When it was their turn to speak, the trio took the stage together. Robert began, his voice steady. "A few months ago, I saw Cygnus as an alien. Different, scary even. But working together, we've learned so much." Jack stepped forward. "It hasn't always been easy. We've had our disagreements, but that's how you grow, by challenging each other, learning from each other." Cygnus concluded, his mandibles quivering slightly. "We are proof that humans and Nasat can not only coexist, but thrive together. The path forward may be difficult, but it is one we must walk side by side." Their words seemed to resonate, a ripple of applause spreading through the audience. As they stepped down, Robert noticed a few Nasat and human youths exchanging thoughtful glances. Over the next few days, the summit organizers pushed for more integrated activities. In one workshop, Robert and Cygnus found themselves paired with a human girl named Ava and a Nasat youth called Zixtik. "Our task," Robert explained, gesturing to the data pads before them, "is to develop an education curriculum that teaches the history of both our peoples, including first contact." Ava frowned. "But won't each side just push their own version of events?" Zixtik's antennae twitched. "Perhaps that is the point, to see where our narratives diverge and why." As they worked, debating key points and sharing perspectives, Robert noticed a gradual shift. The initial wariness gave way to genuine curiosity and engagement. In another part of the summit, Jack threw himself into a collaborative art project. Human and Nasat youths worked side by side, creating a sprawling multimedia installation. Jack stood back, admiring a piece he'd contributed, a collage representing humanity's resilience in the face of adversity. To his surprise, a group of Nasat youths gathered around it, chittering excitedly. "The way you've layered the images," one clicked, antennae waving enthusiastically. "It reminds me of our ancestral cave etchings." Jack grinned, feeling a spark of connection. "Really? I'd love to hear more about that." As the summit neared its conclusion, a sense of cautious optimism prevailed. The achievements of Robert, Cygnus, and Jack's groups were selected for highlight at the final ceremony. Delegates gathered to vote on a manifesto outlining future cooperation initiatives. But as the crowd filed into the main auditorium, alarms suddenly blared. Security personnel rushed in, shouting orders to evacuate. "Potential terrorist threat detected," a voice boomed over the speakers. "This is not a drill. Please proceed calmly to the nearest exit." Panic erupted. Delegates pushed and shoved, trying to reach the doors. In the chaos, Robert lost sight of Jack. "Where is he?" he yelled to Cygnus over the din. Cygnus's compound eyes darted frantically. "I don't see him." As they were herded toward the exit, Robert caught a glimpse of Jack slipping away down a side corridor. "Jack!" he called out, but his friend didn't turn back. Robert grabbed Cygnus's arm. "He's going after the bombers. We have to stop him." Cygnus clicked in alarm, but the security orders— "No time," Robert cut him off. "Jack needs us." Together, they plunged back into the building, fighting against the tide of fleeing delegates, desperately searching for their friend as the threat of violence loomed ever closer. Robert's heart pounded as he and Cygnus pushed through the panicked crowd. Screams and the thud of running feet filled the air. "Jack!" he shouted, scanning frantically for any sign of their friend. Cygnus's antenna twitched. "This way!" he clicked, darting down a service corridor. They emerged backstage, dim light revealing shadowy figures hunched over blinking devices. "Explosives!" Robert breathed. He locked eyes with Cygnus, who nodded grimly. Robert grabbed a nearby fire extinguisher. "Hey!" he yelled, spraying foam at the nearest xenoclast. The terrorist stumbled back, cursing. His companions whirled, raising weapons. As Robert dove for cover, Cygnus's fingers flew over his wrist computer. The detonator's lights flickered and died. "Jammed!" he chittered triumphantly. Gunfire erupted. Robert and Cygnus scrambled behind equipment cases. "Any sign of Jack?" Robert called. A familiar voice answered from across the room. "Over here!" They glimpsed Jack crouched behind a lighting rig. He gestured urgently. "There's more coming." Robert nodded to Cygnus. "You go high, I'll go low." The Nasat scuttled up a scaffold while Robert army crawled along the floor. A xenoclast rounded the corner, and Robert swept his legs. The man crashed down, his weapon skittering away. Above, Cygnus swung from a cable, both feet slamming into another terrorist's chest. The xenoclast crumpled. Jack emerged from hiding, wielding a microphone stand like a staff. He caught a third attacker with a swift strike to the solar plexus. The trio regrouped, breathing hard. "Nice moves," Robert grinned. A slow clap echoed through the space. They turned to see a tall figure emerge from the shadows, dragging a bound and gagged Jack. "Impressive," the xenoclast leader sneered, pressing a gun to Jack's temple. "But futile." Robert's blood ran cold. How had Jack been captured? He met his friend's terrified eyes. "You," the leader pointed at Cygnus, "surrender yourself. Join us in purging the human filth or watch your friend die." Cygnus's mandibles clicked furiously. "Never. We stand united." Robert stepped forward, palms raised. "Listen, whatever you believe, this isn't the answer. We've worked so hard for peace. There's still hope." "Hope?" the leader spat. "There's no hope in submission to aliens." Cygnus's antennae twitched. Robert caught the subtle motion. A plan. "You're right," Cygnus said, his voice steady. "No submission, only partnership." His claw inched towards his wrist computer. The leader's eyes narrowed. "What are you—" A blinding flash, a thunderous crack. The gun clattered to the floor as the xenoclast leader convulsed and collapsed. Jack stumbled forward. Robert caught him, ripping off the gag. "You okay?" Jack nodded shakily. "What happened?" Cygnus's shoulders slumped. "Electromagnetic pulse. It worked, but my tech is fried." Security forces swarmed in, securing the area. As the adrenaline faded, exhaustion hit. The friends leaned on each other, both physically and emotionally. Word of their heroics spread quickly. Delegates clamored to shake their hands, eyes shining with renewed hope. The trio shared a look of quiet tenacity. "We can't let fear win," Robert said. Jack nodded. "The ceremony must go on." Cygnus clicked in agreement. "Together?" They took the stage, battered but unbowed. Robert's voice rang out, recounting their ordeal and triumph. The crowd hung on every word. "Today, we faced darkness," he concluded. "But we overcame it, human and NASAT, side by side. That's the future we're fighting for." Cheers erupted. As if a dam had broken, optimism flooded the room. The Unity Pact was unveiled to thunderous applause. Cygnus stepped forward, pressing his thumb to the document. Robert and Jack followed suit. One by one, representatives from every world present added their mark. As the ceremony concluded, Cygnus stared at his now inert wrist computer. I don't know how to function without my tech," he admitted quietly. Robert squeezed his shoulder. "We'll figure it out together. That's what friends do." Jack grinned. "Besides, now you get to experience the joys of human inefficiency firsthand." Cygnus's mandibles clicked in what might have been a chuckle. "I suppose there's much still to learn." They walked out into the sunlight, a new chapter unfolding before them. The road ahead was uncertain, but they faced it united. As the trio stepped out into the sunlight, the weight of their ordeal began to sink in. Cygnus stumbled, his legs wobbling beneath him. Robert quickly steadied his friend, concern etched on his face. "You okay?" Robert asked, gripping Cygnus's arm. Cygnus clicked his mandibles, a sound that conveyed frustration and exhaustion. I'm not sure. Everything feels wrong." Jack frowned. "What do you mean?" Cygnus lifted his wrist, staring at the dead screen of his once powerful computer. "It's like part of me is missing. I can't access anything. No data, no communication channels, no sensory enhancements. I feel blind." The days that followed were a whirlwind of accolades and attention. News broadcasts plastered their faces across screens worldwide, hailing them as heroes who had saved both human and NASAT lives. But for Cygnus, the praise rang hollow. Back at school, Cygnus sat in his first class, staring blankly at the holographic display. The teacher's voice droned on about Earth history, a subject that had once fascinated him. Now, without his neural interface to provide instant context and background information, the lecture might as well have been in an alien language. "Cygnus?" The teacher's voice cut through his fog. "Can you tell us about the socio-political factors that led to the Second American Civil War?" Cygnus blinked, his compound eyes struggling to focus. I'm sorry, I don't." Snickers rippled through the classroom. Cygnus's antennae drooped in shame. In the cafeteria, Robert watched as Cygnus fumbled with his lunch tray, spilling half its contents. "Here, let me help," Robert offered, reaching out. Cygnus jerked away. "I can do it myself," he snapped, his voice bitter. Jack joined them, his usual grin faltering as he sensed the tension. "Hey, Cig, we're hitting the gym after school. Want to join? Could be fun to—" "No," Cygnus cut him off. "I have studying to do." Robert and Jack exchanged worried glances as Cygnus shuffled away, leaving his lunch untouched. Weeks passed, and Cygnus withdrew further into himself. In physical education, he stood on the sidelines, watching as his classmates effortlessly cleared obstacles and completed team challenges. His own attempts had ended in humiliating failure, his once graceful movements now clumsy and uncoordinated without his biomechanical enhancers. One afternoon, Robert found Cygnus huddled in a corner of the library, surrounded by stacks of books. "What's all this?" Robert asked, picking up a volume on human anatomy. Cygnus didn't look up. "I have to relearn everything. Without my neural link, I can't access any of the information I once knew. I'm useless." Robert's heart ached for his friend. "Cig, that's not true. You're still—" "Still what?" Cygnus interrupted, his voice harsh. "A burden? A liability? I can't even eat properly without choking. I'm not the person. The Nasat. I used to be. Robert opened his mouth to argue, but Cygnus had already turned away, burying himself once more in his books. The annual school wilderness trek arrived, a 3-day hike through rugged mountain terrain. Cygnus trailed behind the group, his exoskeleton heaving with each labored breath. Without his tech to regulate his body's functions, the thin air and steep inclines proved brutal. On the second day, disaster struck. As they navigated a narrow ledge, Cygnus's foot slipped on loose gravel. He tumbled, crying out in pain as he struck the rocky ground below. "Cygnus!" Robert shouted, scrambling down the slope. He found his friend curled in a ball, clutching his leg. The group's wilderness guide assessed the injury. "Looks like a bad sprain," she said. "We need to get him back to base camp." As the guide radioed for assistance, Cygnus watched in awe as she and her fellow rangers sprang into action. Using nothing more than strips of cloth, sturdy branches, and their own knowledge of the terrain, they fashioned a stretcher and splint. "How," Cygnus began, his voice filled with wonder, "how did you do all that without any tech?" The guide smiled. "We learned to work with what nature provides. It's all about adaptability and problem solving." As they carried him down the mountain, Cygnus fell silent, lost in thought. For the first time since losing his tech, he began to see humans, and himself, in a new light. Cygnus stared at the wilderness guide, a newfound respect blooming within him. As they descended the mountain, his mind raced with possibilities. Perhaps there was more to learn from humans than he'd realized. Weeks later, Cygnus sat in a sterile conference room, flanked by Robert and Jack. Across the table, stern-faced officials from both human and Nasat intelligence agencies studied them intently. "Your actions at the Unity conference were impressive," a human agent said, her voice crisp. "We have a proposition for you." Jack leaned forward, eyes bright with curiosity. "What kind of proposition?" The Nasat representative clicked his mandibles. "A covert operation. There's a syndicate plotting attacks across Earth's major cities. We need you to infiltrate and expose them." Robert's brow furrowed. "Us? But we're just students." "Precisely," the human agent replied. "You'll pose as transfer students at a school we suspect is a recruitment hub. Your mission, identify the leadership and gather evidence." Cygnus felt a chill run through his exoskeleton. "It's dangerous, isn't it?" The agents exchanged glances. "Extremely," the Nasat admitted, "but the fate of human-Nasat relations hangs in the balance." The trio shared a long look, unspoken words passing between them. Finally, Robert nodded. "We're in." Weeks later, they stood before their new school, backpacks slung over shoulders, fake IDs tucked away. Jack muttered, "Remember, we're anti-Nasat now. Act the part." Inside, they navigated hallways teeming with students. Cygnus fought the urge to flinch as cruel jokes about Nasats floated past. He clenched his claws, reminding himself it was all an act. Slowly, they wormed their way into the syndicate's outer circle. Late-night meetings in abandoned warehouses. Whispered conversations about taking back Earth. Each step deeper into the conspiracy felt like a betrayal of everything they believed in. One night, they huddled in a dingy apartment, voices low. "I can't do this anymore," Robert hissed, hands shaking as he recounted their latest mission, vandalizing a Nasat cultural center. Cygnus placed a comforting claw on his shoulder. "We have to. Think of what's at stake." Jack nodded grimly. "We're close. I can feel it." Their breakthrough came unexpectedly. Cygnus, sifting through encrypted messages on a stolen datapad, froze. "Guys," he whispered, "I've got something." The messages pointed to a former military officer, now leading the syndicate. Plans for coordinated strikes across the globe, designed to shatter the fragile peace between humans and Nasats. "We need to report this now," Robert insisted. But before they could act, disaster struck. Robert, out on a routine supply run, never returned. Hours stretched into agonizing days. Cygnus paced their hideout, antennae twitching wildly. "We have to find him." Jack nodded, face grim. I've got some contacts off the books. Let's go. They slipped through the city's underbelly, calling in favors and following whispered leads. Finally, they stood before a nondescript warehouse on the outskirts of town. He's in there, Jack murmured, but it's heavily guarded. Cygnus flexed his claws. Then we fight our way in. What followed was chaos. Alarms blared as they breached the perimeter. Gunfire erupted, bullets pinging off metal crates. Cygnus moved with fluid grace, his combat training kicking in as he took down guard after guard. Jack proved equally formidable, years of street brawls serving him well. They fought their way deeper into the compound, desperation fueling every step. Finally, they reached the heart of the facility. There, strapped to a chair and barely conscious, was Robert. His face was a mass of bruises, but his eyes lit up at the sight of his friends. About time, he croaked. Before they could free him, slow clapping echoed through the room. A tall figure emerged from the shadows. The Syndicate commander himself. The Syndicate commander's smirk faded as sirens wailed in the distance. Chaos erupted, and in the confusion, Robert, Cygnus, and Jack seized their chance. They fought their way out, battered, but alive. Their victory was short-lived. In the days that followed, the political landscape shifted dramatically. News feeds buzzed with inflammatory rhetoric from both human and Nasat hardliners. The trio watched in dismay as their efforts to foster unity crumbled. This can't be happening, Robert muttered, scrolling through yet another incendiary article. We risked everything to stop this exact scenario. Cygnus clicked his mandibles in frustration. It seems our actions have only emboldened the extremists. A harsh knock at the door made them jump. Jack peered through the peephole, his face paling. Guys, we've got company, human and Nasat agents. They barely escaped, slipping out through a hidden passage moments before their safe house was raided. On the run, they watched helplessly as their reputations were systematically dismantled. Fabricated footage showed Robert at a human supremacist rally. Doctored images placed Cygnus at the scene of a Nasat terrorist attack. Jack's criminal past was dredged up and exaggerated beyond recognition. Huddled in a dingy motel room, they struggled to make sense of it all. How did we become the enemy? Robert asked, his voice hollow. Before they could formulate a plan, the door burst open. Armed agents swarmed in, weapons trained on the trio. You're under arrest, a gruff voice announced. The next weeks were a blur of stark cells and grueling interrogations. They were separated, each subjected to psychological tactics designed to break their drive. Robert endured sleep deprivation, the constant glare of lights preventing rest. Cygnus found himself in a chamber that interfered with his ability to sense electromagnetic fields, leaving him disoriented and nauseous. Jack faced a barrage of accusatory questions, each designed to chip away at his confidence. Through it all, they refused to turn on each other. Their shared ordeal only strengthened their bond. One night, as Robert lay on his hard bunk, a whisper caught his attention. A guard slipped him a note before quickly moving on. The message was brief. Be ready. Friends are coming. Hours later, alarms blared. In the ensuing confusion, Robert found his cell door unlocked. He raced through the corridors, reuniting with Cygnus and Jack. A hooded figure ushered them to a waiting vehicle. As they sped away from the facility, their rescuer revealed herself, a moderate Nasat politician they'd worked with before. The situation is worse than you know, she explained. But there are still those of us fighting for true integration. For months, they lived as fugitives, moving between safe houses provided by an underground network of human and Nasat allies. They pored over data, tracing the source of the disinformation campaign that had so effectively turned public opinion against them. Their breakthrough came in the form of an encrypted transmission. Jack, his hacking skills pushed to the limit, managed to crack the code. Got it, he exclaimed, eyes wide. It's big, guys. Really big. The evidence was damning. Both human and Nasat intelligence agencies had collaborated to create the very chaos they claimed to be fighting. Their goal, to justify increased control and separation of the two species. We have to expose this, Cygnus said, his antennae twitching with nervous energy. Robert nodded grimly. But how? We're wanted criminals. No one will listen to us. Jack's eyes gleamed with a dangerous idea. What if we make them listen? The Galactic Summit is in 2 days. Every major leader will be there. They formulated a plan, each step fraught with risk. Failure meant not just their own doom, but the collapse of human-Nasat relations. The day of the summit arrived. As delegates filed into the Grand Hall, 3 maintenance workers slipped through security. Beneath their uniforms, Robert, Cygnus, and Jack carried the truth that could change everything. They worked swiftly, bypassing firewalls and overriding security protocols. As the first speaker took the stage, screens throughout the venue flickered to life. The assembled dignitaries gasped as classified documents and damning recordings played out before them. The trio's voices rang out, presenting their evidence with unwavering conviction. Pandemonium erupted. Security forces converged on their position. The friends fought their way through the chaos, their escape a blur of near misses and desperate maneuvers. They emerged into the night air, breathless but triumphant. Behind them, the summit had devolved into a frenzy of accusations and denials. But the truth was out there now, impossible to ignore. In the days that followed, public opinion shifted dramatically. Moderate voices, long silenced, found new strength. The trio watched from hiding as protests erupted across human and Nasat worlds alike, demanding a return to cooperation and understanding. Slowly, cautiously, they emerged from the shadows. Their vindication came not with fanfare, but with quiet acknowledgement from those in power. The old guard was swept aside, replaced by leaders committed to genuine integration. Robert, Cygnus, and Jack found themselves at the center of this new movement. Their unique perspective, forged through adversity, made them invaluable to the fledgling integrationist government. In a ceremony that would have seemed impossible mere months ago, the 3 friends stood before a joint human-Nasat assembly. They were no longer fugitives, but honored architects of a new era. The road ahead won't be easy, Robert addressed the crowd, his voice steady. But together, we can build something truly extraordinary. Cygnus stepped forward, his mandibles clicking in agreement. Our differences are our strength. We've proven that time and again. Jack grinned, the weight of their ordeal finally lifting. So, who's ready to change the galaxy? The applause was deafening, a mix of human cheers and Nasat clicks. As it faded, the assembly turned to the matter at hand, the creation of Planetra, a bold new world where humans and Nasats would live and work as one. The friends exchanged glances, a silent promise passing between them. Whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together, as they always had. The grand vision of Planetra unfolded before Robert, Cygnus, and Jack as they stood in the command center, surrounded by holographic displays of the fledgling colony. Robert's eyes gleamed with pride as he pointed to a sprawling residential complex. Look at this, he said, zooming in on the intricate design. Human and Nasat living spaces seamlessly integrated. It's beautiful. Cygnus clicked his mandibles in agreement. The agricultural domes are a triumph of bioengineering. Our scientists have created hybrid crops that thrive in both atmospheres. Jack grinned, pulling up schematics for the transportation network. And check out these maglev trains. They'll connect every corner of Planetra, built to accommodate both species comfortably. Their moment of triumph was short-lived. Alarms blared, red lights flashing across every screen. Jack's fingers flew across the control panel. We're under attack. Cybernetic intrusion. Multiple vectors. Robert sprinted to a nearby terminal. It's a coordinated assault. They're hitting every system simultaneously. Cygnus's antennae twitched wildly as he processed the incoming data. The firewalls are failing. We're losing control of critical infrastructure. The friends fought desperately, their fingers dancing across keyboards, voices hoarse as they shouted commands to their integration forces. But for every breach they sealed, 2 more opened. The environmental controls are going haywire, Jack yelled, his face bathed in the sickly glow of malfunctioning readouts. Oxygen levels are plummeting in Sector 7. Robert hit his fist on the console. We've lost the power grid in the eastern quadrant. Backup generators aren't responding. Cygnus's voice was tight with fear. The AI governing resource allocation has gone rogue. It's flooding the volatile material storage with coolant. A deafening explosion rocked the command center. Through the viewport, they watched in horror as a fireball engulfed one of Planetra's primary habitation domes. "No!" Robert screamed, his face ashen. "There were thousands of people in there." The cacophony of alarms gave way to an eerie silence. Smoke billowed from multiple sites across the colony. Emergency broadcasts crackled to life, filling the air with panicked voices and accusations. "This is Ambassador Thrix of the Nasat Confederation," a stern voice intoned. "We have evidence that human extremists are behind this cowardly attack. All cooperation with Earth is suspended immediately." Before they could react, another transmission cut in. "This is General Hawthorne of Earth Command. Nasat treachery has cost innocent human lives. We are implementing full planetary quarantine and defensive measures." Jack's shoulders slumped as he watched decades of progress unravel in minutes. "It's all falling apart," he whispered. The door to the command center burst open. Armed soldiers, a mix of human and Nasat forces, stormed in, weapons trained on the three friends. "Robert Smith, Cygnus, Jack Reeves," a gruff voice barked. "You're under arrest for conspiracy and sabotage. Come quietly or we'll use force." As they were led away in restraints, Robert caught a final glimpse of Planetra through the viewport. Fires raged across the landscape, a haunting echo of their shattered dreams.
You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel. And for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.